My name is Alice, and I'm 32. 3 days ago, I buried my father and discovered that being the good daughter apparently means absolutely nothing when lawyers start reading wills. I was the only one who stayed. While my brother Robert was building his empire in Manhattan, I was here in Millfield, changing Dad's oxygen tanks and driving him to chemo appointments. The cancer took 2 years to kill him, and I spent every single day of those 2 years watching him fade away. Should have taken better care of him. Robert smirked at me across the lawyer's mahogany desk, straightening his $1,000 tie. Maybe then he would have seen your true worth. I kept my mouth shut. 20 years of practice had taught me that responding to Robert only encouraged him. Then Mr. Mitchell, Dad's lawyer, cleared his throat and said 2 words that made my blood freeze. Actually, Robert, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt undervalued by your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me take you back 8 months, when this whole mess really began. Dad had been having what he called good days, meaning he could sit up without assistance and actually finish a bowl of soup. That Tuesday morning in March, I found him in his study, staring at a stack of legal documents. "Alice, honey," he said, his voice still carrying that raspy edge from the treatments. "Sit down, we need to talk." I perched on the edge of his worn leather chair, the same one where he'd read me bedtime stories 25 years ago. Now it smelled like medicine and regret. "I know what you've given up for me," he continued, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he reached for mine. "Your job in Boston, that boy you were seeing, your whole life." "Dad, don't. Let me finish." His grip tightened. "Robert thinks he's entitled to everything because he's successful. Because he's the son who made something of himself." Dad's laugh turned into a coughing fit that left him gasping. "But success isn't just about money, sweetheart." I handed him his water glass, watching as he struggled to catch his breath. The man who had once carried me on his shoulders was disappearing a little more each day. "There's something I need you to know about our family situation," he whispered, glancing toward the door like Robert might materialize at any moment. "Something complicated that I've been handling alone." My heart skipped. Dad had always protected me from family business problems. "I can't tell you everything yet," he said urgently. "But promise me, no matter what happens after I'm gone, don't let Robert make any major decisions about family assets without consulting Mr. Mitchell first. There are things Robert doesn't know. Things that could destroy everything if handled wrong." Before I could ask what he meant, we heard Robert's BMW rumbling up the driveway. Dad quickly shuffled the papers back into a manila envelope. "Promise me, Alice. Go to Mr. Mitchell first before you agree to anything." I promised, Dad. 2 weeks later, he was gone. The funeral was everything Robert wanted and nothing Dad would have chosen. Expensive flowers, catered reception, and a bunch of his Manhattan business associates who had never met our father, but showed up anyway because networking doesn't stop for grief. I stood in the back of our childhood living room, watching Robert work the crowd like he was running for mayor. 3 years of caring for Dad and nobody asked me how I was holding up. Instead, I got condescending pats on the shoulder and comments about how noble it was that I had stayed to help. "Alice always was the sensitive one," I heard Robert telling some woman in a designer dress. "Never had much ambition, but she's got a good heart. The sensitive one." That was Robert's favorite way to dismiss me like my feelings were a character flaw, instead of the reason I'd been the one changing Dad's bedsheets at 3 a.m. Mrs. Henderson from next door found me hiding in the kitchen, staring at a sink full of dirty casserole dishes. "Your father talked about you constantly," she said, drying a plate with hands that had baked cookies for every holiday of my childhood. "Always so proud of how you took care of him. Said you were stronger than anyone in the family realized." Her words hit me harder than any of Robert's insults. When had anyone besides Dad ever seen me as strong? "He also said," Mrs. Henderson continued quietly, "that you had the wisdom to handle complicated situations better than people twice your age." That night, after the last mourner left and Robert retreated to his hotel room because staying in Dad's house would have been too depressing, I sat alone in the living room. The silence felt heavier than all the noise from the reception. I remembered Dad's final words about consulting Mr. Mitchell first. There had been an urgency in his voice that I was only now beginning to understand. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Dad's contacts until I found the lawyer's number. Even though it was nearly midnight, I sent a text. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Alice Hartwell. Dad said I should speak with you before making any decisions about family matters. Could we meet this week?" The response came within minutes. "Alice, I've been waiting for your call. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 2 p.m.? There are things your father wanted you to know that we couldn't discuss while Robert was handling funeral arrangements." Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Dad's voice. There are things Robert doesn't know. Things that could destroy everything if handled wrong. What things? What could possibly be so complicated that Dad couldn't share it with both his children? I had a feeling that tomorrow's meeting with Mr. Mitchell was going to change everything I thought I knew about our family. The law office smelled like old books and carefully kept secrets. Mr. Mitchell had been Dad's lawyer for 30 years, and his weathered face carried the weight of every family crisis he'd helped navigate. "Alice," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk, "your father gave me very specific instructions about this conversation. He was quite worried about how Robert would react to the family's financial situation." "What financial situation?" I asked, confused. "I've been managing Dad's books for 2 years. The construction business is doing well." Mr. Mitchell nodded grimly. "That's part of what your father wanted me to explain. The construction company's success is built on borrowed time, and Robert has no idea how precarious things really are." He opened a thick folder and spread out documents I'd never seen before. 15 years ago, your father quietly leased the mineral rights to your family's farm to Mountain View Mining Corporation. The lease provided steady income that allowed him to expand the construction business without taking on dangerous debt. I stared at the contracts, trying to process this information. Mineral rights? What kind of minerals? Initially, nothing particularly valuable. Mountain View paid a modest annual fee for the right to conduct geological surveys. Your father used that money wisely. It kept the business solvent during economic downturns and allowed him to avoid the kind of risky investments that destroy family companies. Mr. Mitchell pulled out another set of documents. However, 4 years ago, your father discovered that his business partner, Vincent Torres, had been systematically embezzling money from the company. Torres had been stealing for nearly 3 years before your father caught him. My stomach dropped. I'd never heard the name Vincent Torres. Your father spent months documenting the theft and building a case. But instead of pressing criminal charges, he made a different choice. He used Torres's fear of prosecution to force him out of the business completely. Why didn't he have Torres arrested? Because, Mr. Mitchell said quietly, Torres threatened to expose the mineral lease agreement to Robert and claimed that your father had been hiding assets from his own family. Your father realized that Robert would immediately demand to liquidate the mining rights, which would have triggered early termination clauses, and cost the family millions in future income. The picture was becoming clearer and more disturbing. Dad bought Torres out to protect the lease? Exactly. It cost him nearly $2 million money he borrowed against future lease payments. That's why the construction company has been struggling lately. Your father sacrificed short-term stability to protect long-term family security. Mr. Mitchell reached for another folder. But there's more, Alice. 3 months ago, Mountain View completed their comprehensive geological survey. They found significant deposits of rare earth minerals throughout your property. He handed me a letter bearing the Mountain View Mining logo. They're offering to purchase the land and mineral rights outright for $65 million, plus royalties on extracted materials over the next 25 years. I couldn't breathe. $65 million. Your father knew this offer was coming. Mr. Mitchell continued. That's why he restructured his will 6 months ago. He realized that Robert would want to sell immediately and split the money. But your father believed the royalty payments would provide better long-term security for the family. So Robert doesn't know about any of this? Robert knows that Torres was bought out, but he thinks it was just a normal business disagreement. He has no idea about the embezzlement, the mineral rights, or the mining offer. Mr. Mitchell looked at me seriously. Your father's greatest fear was that Robert would make impulsive decisions about family assets without understanding their full value or complexity. I thought about Robert's comment at the funeral. Should have taken better care of him. When is the will reading? I asked. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Alice, I need you to understand your father structured his will very carefully to protect both you and Robert from making costly mistakes. But Robert may not see it that way initially. Have you ever discovered that everything you thought you knew about your family was just the surface of a much deeper story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The will reading was scheduled for the next morning, but Robert arrived an hour early with 2 lawyers I'd never seen before. Alice, he said, his voice carrying that tone he used when he was about to explain why I was wrong about something. I've been thinking about Dad's estate, and there are some concerns we need to address. Mr. Mitchell emerged from his office, taking in Robert's legal entourage with obvious displeasure. Robert, we discussed this yesterday. The will reading is at 10 a.m. as scheduled. Actually, said one of Robert's lawyers, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit, we'd like to review any recent changes to Mr. Hartwell's will before the formal reading. Our client has reason to believe there may have been alterations made during a period when his father's judgment was compromised by medication. I felt my face flush with anger. They were already suggesting Dad wasn't competent when he made his final decisions. That's interesting, Mr. Mitchell said calmly, because Frank anticipated that concern. He handed Robert's lawyer a sealed envelope. Psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Sarah Chen, dated 4 months ago. She confirmed that your client's father was completely mentally competent and specifically capable of making complex legal decisions. The sharp-faced lawyer scanned the document, her confident expression wavering slightly. Furthermore, Mr. Mitchell continued, Frank requested that I document his reasons for any will changes he made. Would you like to hear that recording? Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Recording? Mr. Mitchell pressed play on a digital recorder. Dad's voice filled the room, weak but absolutely clear. This is Frank Hartwell, speaking of my own free will on March 15th. I am changing my will because I have discovered information about family finances that my son Robert doesn't understand. I have also learned that Robert has been in communication with Vincent Torres, despite not knowing that Torres embezzled money from our family business. Robert's face went pale. What? Dad, I never... Mr. Mitchell paused the recording. Would you like me to continue, Robert? Your father documented several conversations where you mentioned Torres as a potential consultant for expanding the business after your inheritance. I didn't know Torres stole anything, Robert protested. He contacted me months ago with some interesting business proposals. How was I supposed to know? Because, Mr. Mitchell interrupted, your father tried to warn you, but you consistently dismissed his concerns as medication-induced confusion. He has 15 hours of recorded conversations documenting your responses. The room fell silent except for the sound of Robert's heavy breathing. Mr. Mitchell opened the will and began reading. To my son, Robert, who has proven his business acumen in New York, I leave my construction company, including all assets, equipment, and ongoing contracts. However, this inheritance comes with a 5-year management restriction that Robert previously agreed to in writing, preventing any sale or merger of company assets. Robert looked confused. What management restriction? The estate planning documents you signed last year, Mr. Mitchell said. Your lawyers advised you it was standard paperwork, but you actually agreed to a 5-year stabilization period for any inherited business assets. I watched Robert's lawyers whisper frantically among themselves as they reviewed papers from their briefcases. To my daughter Alice, Mr. Mitchell continued, who has demonstrated unwavering loyalty and sound judgment, I leave the family farmhouse and all associated property, including mineral rights and any related business agreements. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. That's it? Robert's voice cracked. She gets a rundown farm and I get a business that I can't even sell? Actually, Robert, Mr. Mitchell said, and something in his tone made us both freeze. There's something else your father wanted you both to understand about the family's financial situation. Mr. Mitchell reached into his desk and pulled out the folder I'd seen the day before, the one containing the mining contracts and geological surveys. Alice, he said, your inheritance includes more than just the farmhouse. The property encompasses 47 acres, including the mineral rights your father leased to Mountain View Mining 15 years ago. He spread the geological survey across his desk. The familiar outline of our family land was covered with technical notations and colored zones indicating mineral deposits. Robert, Mr. Mitchell continued, your father kept the mining lease private because he knew you would want to liquidate it immediately for quick cash. He believed correctly, as it turns out that patience would be more profitable for the family long term. Robert leaned forward, studying the documents with growing interest. How profitable are we talking about? 3 months ago, Mountain View completed their comprehensive survey. They found substantial deposits of rare earth minerals essential for electronics and renewable energy manufacturing. Mr. Mitchell pulled out the official offer letter. They're prepared to purchase the mineral rights for $65 million, plus royalties estimated at $15 to $20 million over the next 25 years. I watched Robert's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and then calculating greed. $85 million, he said slowly, for Alice's property. For the property that Dad specifically left to Alice, I corrected. Robert's expression hardened. Alice, you can't seriously think you're capable of handling negotiations worth that much money. This requires sophisticated business expertise that you simply don't have. And there it was, the same condescending tone he'd used our entire lives. What I have, I said quietly, is Dad's trust. He chose to give me this responsibility for a reason. Because you were here manipulating him while he was sick, Robert snapped, his businessman facade finally cracking. You isolated him from family and convinced him to change his will in your favor. Robert, Mr. Mitchell interrupted, I need to show you something else. He pulled out another folder, this one containing the evidence Dad had compiled about Torres's embezzlement. Your father didn't just document Torres's theft for legal purposes. He also documented your communications with Torres over the past year. Mr. Mitchell handed Robert a stack of printed emails. Every message where you discussed modernizing the business, bringing in fresh expertise, and maximizing post-inheritance opportunities. Robert read through the emails, his face growing paler with each page. Torres has been feeding you information and business strategies for months, Mr. A. Mitchell continued. What he didn't tell you is that those same strategies are identical to the ones he used to embezzle money from 7 other family businesses over the past 15 years. Mr. Mitchell opened another file, revealing a police report and newspaper clippings. Vincent Torres is currently under investigation by the FBI for a pattern of targeting family-owned businesses during periods of transition or crisis. Your father's decision to buy him out rather than prosecute him was the only thing that kept Torres from destroying our construction company the way he destroyed others. Robert stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. Your conversations with Torres weren't accidental. Robert, he specifically targeted you because he knew you would eventually inherit the business, and he was positioning himself to regain access to family assets through you. I felt sick. While I'd been focused on Dad's medical care, Robert had been unknowingly planning to hand our family business over to a career criminal. I didn't know, Robert whispered. No, Mr. Mitchell agreed. You didn't know because you never asked the right questions. Your father tried to warn you about Torres multiple times, but you dismissed his concerns as confusion from pain medication. Mr. Mitchell played another recording, this one of Robert's voice from a phone call with Dad. Dad, you're overthinking this Torres situation. Vincent has some innovative ideas about expanding into commercial development. Maybe it's time to let go of old grudges and focus on growth opportunities. And Dad's weary response. Son, if you knew what I know about Vincent, you'd understand why that's impossible. But you never wanted to know what he knew, Mr. Mitchell said to Robert. You just wanted to inherit and make changes. The room fell silent as the full scope of Robert's near catastrophe became clear. So what happens now? I asked. Mr. Mitchell handed me a business card. You have some decisions to make about the mining offer, Alice, but you have time to make them carefully, with proper advice. He looked at Robert. And you have a construction business to run responsibly for the next 5 years. That evening, I sat in Dad's study, trying to process everything I'd learned. The manila envelope he'd sealed months ago was still in his desk drawer, marked with my name in his careful handwriting. Inside, I found a letter written in the shaky script that had developed during his final months. My dearest Alice, if you're reading this, it means the will reading went as I expected, with Robert angry and you confused about why I've given you such enormous responsibility. I want you to understand that my decision wasn't about loving you more than your brother. It was about trusting you to handle complexity without letting greed override good judgment. Robert has many strengths, but patience isn't one of them. If he inherited the mineral rights, he would sell them immediately and spend the money on expanding the business or investing in new ventures. Within 5 years, the money would be gone, and our family would have nothing to show for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You, on the other hand, have spent your entire life thinking about long-term consequences. When you were 10 years old and saved your Christmas money for 6 months to buy your mother a special birthday present, I knew you understood something that Robert never learned. The difference between wanting something and needing something. This mining money isn't something you need right now, Alice. But someday, when you're ready to start a family, or when you find a purpose that requires resources, or when Robert's children need help with college, this money will be there because you'll have preserved it. The Torres situation is more complicated than I was able to explain during the will reading. Robert doesn't just not know about the embezzlement, he's been actively cultivating a relationship with Torres for over a year. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago when I realized what was happening. Torres has been carefully manipulating Robert, feeding him business ideas and strategies that sound innovative, but are actually designed to give Torres access to our company assets once Robert inherits. The investigator's report is in the basement safe. The combination is your mother's birthday. What you'll find there will shock you, but it will also help you understand why I had to structure the will the way I did. Robert isn't just naive about Torres. He's already agreed to bring Torres back as a senior consultant as soon as he takes control of the business. Torres has convinced him that I forced him out unfairly and that he has valuable connections that could double the company's revenue. The truth is that Torres has been living off borrowed money for 3 years. hiding from the families whose businesses he destroyed, and planning his comeback through our family. I couldn't let that happen, Alice. Not just for our sake, but for the 12 employees who depend on this business, and the clients who trust us to complete their projects honestly. The mining money gives you options, but it also gives you responsibility. Use it wisely. Help Robert understand what family really means, not just sharing profits, but protecting each other from making catastrophic mistakes. There's one more thing you need to know. Mr. Mitchell has instructions to contact the FBI if Torres attempts to re-establish contact with our family after my death. Torres doesn't know about the mining money yet, but when he finds out, he'll become desperate to claim a share of it. Be careful, sweetheart. Be smart. And remember that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to let someone make a decision that will destroy them. I'm proud of who you've become, Alice. Not just because you took care of me, but because you've always taken care of what matters most. The basement safe also contains legal documents that will protect you if Robert tries to contest the will. I hope you'll never need them, but your brother has always been better at business than at accepting defeat gracefully. I love you both, but I trust you to do what's right for everyone. Dad. I folded the letter carefully and walked to the basement. Behind the old water heater, exactly where Dad had said, was a safe I'd never noticed during all my years living in this house. I punched in Mom's birthday 0814 and the lock clicked open. Inside were 3 files: Torres's criminal history, evidence of his ongoing contact with Robert, and a legal document that would change everything if I ever needed to use it. But it was the 4th item that made me gasp. A handwritten note from Robert, dated just 2 weeks ago, agreeing to Torres's proposal to restructure the family business for maximum efficiency and profit. My brother hadn't just been planning to bring Torres back as a consultant. He'd been planning to sell our father's company to Torres's investment group as soon as he inherited it. Dad hadn't just protected me with his will. He'd protected Robert from destroying everything our family had built. 2 days after the will reading, Robert knocked on my front door at 7 a.m. I could see through the window that he'd been sitting in his car in my driveway for at least an hour, working up the courage for this conversation. Alice, he said when I opened the door, we need to talk, really talk, without lawyers or recordings or any of that other stuff. I led him into the kitchen and made coffee while he sat at our childhood breakfast table, looking smaller somehow than he had in Mr. Mitchell's office. I've been thinking about everything Dad said about Torres, about the business, he began. I want you to know that I had no idea Vincent was a criminal. I believe you, I said, and meant it. Robert was many things: arrogant, condescending, selfish, but he wasn't malicious. He'd been manipulated by someone much more experienced at deception. The thing is, Robert continued, I've been looking at the construction company's book since the will reading. Really looking, not just glancing at the summary reports Dad used to send me. He pulled out a folder of financial documents. Dad borrowed against future income to buy Torres out, but he also used that situation to restructure the company's debt and eliminate some risky contracts that could have bankrupted us during the next economic downturn. Robert's voice carried a note of grudging admiration. He wasn't just protecting us from Torres, he was protecting us from my impatience. This was the most thoughtful analysis I'd ever heard from Robert about our family's situation. Alice, I want to propose something, and I want you to hear me out completely before you respond. I nodded, curious despite myself. Keep the mineral rights. Handle the negotiations with Mountain View however you think is best. But let me buy the farmhouse from you for fair market value. I want to move back to Millfield and run Dad's business the way he would have wanted. I blinked, surprised. You want to leave New York? I've been thinking about that too. Robert ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from our childhood when he was working through a difficult problem. My business in Manhattan is successful, but it's not satisfying. I'm making rich people richer, but I'm not building anything that matters. He gestured around our mother's kitchen, with its worn counters and mismatched chairs. Dad's business employs 12 people who live in this community. It builds homes and commercial buildings that will be here for generations. When Dad died, 3 different clients came to the funeral to tell me how honest and reliable he was. Robert's voice caught slightly. When was the last time someone said that about my work in New York? I studied my brother's face, looking for signs of the manipulation or calculation that had defined our relationship for so long. Instead, I saw something I hadn't seen since we were children: genuine uncertainty. What about your apartment in Manhattan? Your clients there? I can handle most of my current projects remotely, and I'm not taking on new clients. I want to learn how to run Dad's business properly before the 5-year restriction period ends. He met my eyes directly. Alice, I was wrong about almost everything. About Torres, about Dad's judgment, about your capabilities. I don't want to be wrong about this too. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever gotten from Robert. "The farmhouse isn't for sale," I said finally. His face fell, but before he could respond, I continued. "But you can live here while you're learning the business. Dad's bedroom is too painful for me to go into anyway, and this house is too big for one person." Robert stared at me. "You'd let me move back home?" "On one condition," I said. "No more secrets. No more making plans without talking to each other first. If someone approaches you about business opportunities or investments, you tell me. If I'm considering major decisions about the mining money, I tell you. We're family, Robert. It's time we started acting like it." My brother's eyes filled with tears, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him since we were children. "Alice, I don't deserve—" "This isn't about what you deserve," I interrupted. "It's about what our family needs. Dad spent his last 2 years cleaning up messes and protecting us from disasters we didn't even know were coming. The least we can do is try to take care of each other going forward." Robert nodded, unable to speak. That afternoon, we drove to Mr. Mitchell's office together to discuss the practical details of Robert's transition back to Millfield. It felt strange but right, making plans as partners instead of adversaries. But as we left the lawyer's office, I noticed a familiar car following us at a distance. When I pointed it out to Robert, his face went pale. "That's Vincent's car," he said. Torres was back, and he'd clearly learned about the mining money. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below. The next morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but something told me to answer it. "Ms. Hartwell, this is Vincent Torres. I believe we need to have a conversation about your recent windfall." His voice was smooth, confident, exactly what I'd expected from someone who'd spent years manipulating people. "Mr. Torres," I said, putting the phone on speaker so Robert could hear. "I don't think we have anything to discuss." "Oh, I think we do. You see, I've been following the developments with your father's estate, and I'm concerned that you may not fully understand the complexity of what you're dealing with." Robert was shaking his head frantically, mouthing, "Don't engage with him." But I was curious to hear Torres's pitch. "I'm listening," I said. "Managing a multi-million-dollar mineral rights deal requires expertise that most people simply don't possess. The mining industry is notorious for taking advantage of inexperienced property owners. Without proper representation, you could easily lose millions to unfavorable contract terms. And you're offering to help me out of the goodness of your heart?" Torres chuckled. "Nothing in business is free, Ms. Hartwell. I would charge a standard consulting fee, say 15% of your final settlement. It's much less than most firms would charge, and I guarantee you'll end up with significantly more money than if you try to handle this alone. 15% of $80 million. $12 million for Torres, just for showing up. That's a very generous offer," I said, "but I think I can manage on my own." "Ms. Hartwell," Torres's voice hardened, "I don't think you understand what you're rejecting. I have 15 years of experience in mineral rights negotiations. I have connections throughout the industry. I know which companies are trustworthy and which ones will cheat you. Like you cheated my father?" The line went quiet for a moment. Then Torres laughed a sound that made my skin crawl. "Your father told you his version of our business disagreement, I see. What he probably didn't mention is that I have documentation of some very questionable financial decisions he made over the years. Decisions that the IRS might find interesting." My blood ran cold. Torres was threatening to report Dad to the IRS posthumously, which could trigger an audit and freeze all family assets. "What kind of decisions?" I asked carefully. "The mineral lease income, for starters. Very creative accounting methods to minimize tax liability. Then there's the matter of some construction contracts that were completed with, shall we say, flexible adherence to building codes." Robert grabbed my arm, shaking his head violently. These were clearly lies designed to scare me into cooperating. "Mr. Torres," I said, "if you had evidence of actual wrongdoing, you would have used it years ago instead of stealing money from my father's business." "Who says I stole anything?" Torres's voice turned cold. "Your father's accusations were never proven in court. They were just the paranoid delusions of a sick man who couldn't handle having a younger, more innovative partner." The sheer audacity of his lies was breathtaking. "I'll tell you what," I said. "Why don't you come by the house this afternoon? We can discuss this face to face." "Alice, no," Robert whispered urgently. "Excellent," Torres said. "I'll be there at 2 p.m. And Ms. Hartwell, I hope you'll be more reasonable in person than you're being on the phone." After he hung up, Robert stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Alice, you can't let him come here. He's dangerous and he's desperate. People do stupid things when they're desperate. Which is exactly why we need to handle this carefully." I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Mitchell's number. We're not meeting with Torres alone. An hour later, Mr. Mitchell arrived with 2 additional people, Detective Sarah Martinez from the State Police Fraud Division and FBI Agent David Park from the White Collar Crime Unit. Torres doesn't know it yet, Detective Martinez explained, but he's been under federal investigation for 18 months. We've been building a case based on complaints from 7 different families whose businesses he destroyed. The problem is that most of his victims were too embarrassed or financially devastated to pursue prosecution, Agent Park added. Torres is very careful about covering his tracks and discrediting anyone who tries to expose him. But now he's making a mistake, Mr. Mitchell said. By threatening you and attempting to extort consulting fees, he's giving us grounds for immediate arrest. At exactly 2 p.m., Vincent Torres knocked on our front door. I opened it to find a man who looked nothing like the confident criminal mastermind I'd imagined. Torres was shorter than average, probably in his mid-50s, with thinning hair and an expensive suit that couldn't quite disguise his desperation. "Ms. Hartwell," he said with practiced charm, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "Come in," I said. "There are some people I'd like you to meet." The look on Torres's face when he saw Detective Martinez and Agent Park was worth every moment of anxiety I'd felt about this meeting. "Vincent Torres," Agent Park said, standing and displaying his badge. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and extortion." As the handcuffs clicked around Torres's wrists, he looked at me with undisguised hatred. "This isn't over," he snarled. "You have no idea what you're getting into with that mining deal. Those companies will eat you alive." "Maybe," I said calmly, "but at least they're not criminals." As the police car disappeared down our driveway with Torres in the back seat, Robert turned to me with something approaching awe. "Alice, how did you know to call the FBI?" "I didn't," I admitted. "But Dad's letter mentioned that Mr. Mitchell had instructions to contact them if Torres tried to approach our family. I figured it was worth a phone call." "You set him up?" Robert said admiringly. "No," I corrected. "I gave him enough rope to hang himself. There's a difference." But even as I felt relief at Torres's arrest, I knew this was just the beginning. In 2 days, representatives from Mountain View Mining would arrive to begin serious negotiations about the mineral rights purchase. And unlike Torres, they were completely legitimate business people who would expect me to know exactly what I was doing. The Mountain View Mining representatives arrived on Thursday morning in a convoy that looked like a presidential visit. 3 black SUVs, 7 people in expensive suits, and enough briefcases to stock a law firm. I met them in Dad's study, which I'd prepared by removing all the family photos and personal items that might make me seem naive or emotional. Robert sat beside me, taking notes and asking technical questions that demonstrated we weren't complete amateurs. "Ms. Hartwell," said Dr. Sarah Chen, Mountain View's lead negotiator, "we're very excited about the potential of your property. Our geological surveys indicate mineral deposits that could be extremely valuable to both parties." She spread out charts and technical reports that looked like something from a science textbook. "However, Chen continued, "I want to be completely transparent with you about the challenges involved in this project. Mineral extraction is a complex, long-term undertaking with significant environmental and logistical considerations. This wasn't the high-pressure sales pitch I'd been expecting. Instead, Dr. Chen was explaining potential problems. Our initial offer of $65 million is based on current market prices and extraction cost estimates. But those numbers could change significantly based on factors we can't control: environmental regulations, market fluctuations, extraction difficulties, or changes in demand for rare earth minerals." Robert leaned forward. "Are you trying to talk us out of selling to you?" Dr. Chen smiled. "Actually, we're trying to make sure you understand exactly what you're agreeing to. Mountain View has been burned in the past by property owners who had unrealistic expectations about mining operations. We find that honest communication up front prevents expensive legal disputes later." She handed me a document that was much thicker than I'd anticipated. "This is our complete offer, including all terms and conditions. I strongly recommend that you have it reviewed by attorneys who specialize in mineral rights law, not just general practice lawyers." I spent the next hour asking questions that Mr. Mitchell had helped me prepare. Dr. Chen answered each one thoroughly, never seeming impatient or condescending. "Ms. Hartwell," she said finally, "may I ask why you're considering selling the rights outright rather than negotiating a lease agreement with royalty payments?" It was a good question, one that Robert and I had discussed extensively. "My father spent 15 years managing a lease agreement," I said. "It provided steady income, but it also required constant attention and expertise that I'm not sure I can provide long-term." "That's a fair point," Dr. Chen acknowledged. "Lease management can be complex, but I want to make sure you've considered all your options." She pulled out another document, a detailed analysis of different financial structures for our agreement. A straight purchase gives you immediate cash, but no ongoing income. A lease with royalties provides less upfront money but potentially much higher total returns over time. There's also a hybrid option, partial purchase with reduced royalties, that gives you significant immediate cash plus long-term income security. I looked at Robert, who shrugged. It's your decision, Alice. Dad left this to you for a reason. That evening, after the Mountain View team left, Robert and I sat in the kitchen discussing the various offers. The hybrid option makes the most sense to me, Robert said. $40 million upfront, plus royalties that could total another $30 to $50 million over 25 years. But what if the market for rare earth minerals crashes? What if environmental regulations shut down the operation? What if Mountain View goes bankrupt? What if you get hit by lightning? Robert countered. Alice, you can't make decisions based on every possible disaster. Sometimes you have to trust that things will work out. It was good advice, but I wasn't ready to make a $70 million decision after 2 days of consideration. I need more time, I said. How much more time? Dr. Chen said I could take up to 60 days to decide. I want to use at least some of that time to really understand what I'm choosing between. Robert nodded. That's smart. But Alice, while you're thinking about it, there's something else we need to discuss. He pulled out a folder I hadn't seen before. I've been researching Torres's background, trying to understand how I got so completely fooled by him. Robert's voice was quiet, almost ashamed. What I found is that Torres didn't just target me randomly. He specifically researches families with aging parents who own valuable assets. He handed me a newspaper clipping from a town in Ohio. This family owned a trucking company worth about $3 million. When the father got sick, Torres approached the son with consulting services and expansion ideas. Within 18 months, the business was bankrupted and the family lost everything. I read through the article, feeling sick. The pattern was identical to what had almost happened to us. Torres targets families during times of crisis because that's when people are most vulnerable to manipulation, Robert continued. He specifically looks for situations where adult children are making inheritance decisions while dealing with grief and stress. How many families did he destroy? At least 7 that I could document. Probably more that were never reported. Robert met my eyes. Alice, I need you to know, if Dad hadn't structured his will the way he did, Torres would have gotten everything. Not just the construction business, but information about the mineral rights too. The full scope of what Dad had prevented hit me like a physical blow. Dad didn't just protect me, I said slowly. He protected both of us. Yeah, Robert agreed. And now it's our job to make sure his protection wasn't wasted. 3 weeks into my 60-day decision period, I received a phone call that changed everything. Ms. Hartwell, this is Jennifer Torres. My blood ran cold. Are you related to Vincent Torres? Unfortunately, yes. Vincent is my ex-husband. Her voice carried a mixture of exhaustion and determination. I'm calling because I have information about your situation that I think you need to hear. Against Robert's advice, I agreed to meet with Jennifer at a coffee shop in the next town. She was nothing like what I'd expected, a tired-looking woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and calloused hands that suggested she worked for a living. Vincent has been calling me from jail, she began without preamble. He's furious about his arrest, and he's been ranting about your family and the mining money. What did he say? Jennifer pulled out a notebook. He told me that your mineral rights are worth much more than Mountain View is offering. He claims to have inside information about rare earth mineral prices that suggests you could get twice what they're proposing. I felt a chill of unease. How would he know that? That's what I wanted to warn you about, Jennifer said. Vincent doesn't have inside information about mineral prices. What he has is a pattern of telling people their assets are worth more than they actually are, then positioning himself as the expert who can get them a better deal. She opened her notebook to a page covered with her handwriting. After Vincent approached you, he started making phone calls to try to find other mining companies that might be interested in your property. He was planning to contact you again and claim that he'd discovered a bidding war for your mineral rights. But he's in jail. Vincent has associates who aren't in jail yet, Jennifer said grimly. I'm telling you this because Vincent destroyed my family's business 15 years ago using exactly these tactics. He convinced my father that his manufacturing company was worth much more than the offers he was receiving, then helped negotiate a deal that left my family with nothing. Jennifer pulled out a photograph, a middle-aged man standing in front of a factory. My father spent 40 years building that business. After Vincent got through with him, Dad lost everything and died of a heart attack 6 months later. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. I don't want that to happen to another family. Why are you helping me? I'm the reason your ex-husband is in jail. Jennifer smiled grimly. Vincent has been in and out of jail for years. The difference is that this time the charges might actually stick. Your cooperation with the FBI gave them evidence they've been trying to collect for 2 years. She handed me a business card. That's the number for Agent Park. Vincent's associates don't know that I've been cooperating with the FBI investigation. If anyone approaches you claiming to represent alternative mining interests or offering to maximize your mineral rights value, call Agent Park immediately. How will I know if someone is working with Torres? They'll tell you that Mountain View is cheating you. They'll claim to have connections with Chinese or European mining companies that pay higher prices. They'll offer to represent you for just a small percentage of the increased value. Jennifer's voice was bitter with experience. And they'll be very charming, very convincing, and very concerned about your financial welfare. That evening, I called Dr. Chen at Mountain View Mining. Dr. Chen, I have a hypothetical question. If someone told me that Chinese mining companies typically pay higher prices for rare earth mineral rights than American companies, would that be accurate? There was a pause. Ms. Hartwell, has someone approached you with that claim? It's hypothetical. Well, hypothetically speaking, that claim would be false. Chinese mining companies are generally more interested in purchasing extracted materials than acquiring foreign mineral rights. Most international transactions involve much more regulatory complexity and significantly higher legal costs. Dr. Chen's voice carried a note of concern. May I ask why you're asking? I explained about Jennifer's warning, without mentioning Torres by name. Ms. Hartwell, I want you to know that our offer is based on standard industry calculations and current market conditions. If you receive competing offers, I encourage you to have them reviewed by independent mineral rights attorneys. But please be very careful about anyone who approaches you with promises of dramatically higher payments. Why? Because legitimate mining companies don't work that way. We don't send representatives to people's homes to make surprise offers, and we don't promise returns that are significantly above market rates. Dr. Chen paused. Fraudulent mineral rights schemes are unfortunately common. The FBI has several ongoing investigations into criminals who specifically target property owners with valuable mineral deposits. After I hung up, I realized that Dad's protection hadn't ended with his death. By leaving me the mineral rights instead of Robert, he'd given me something that Torres couldn't manipulate or steal, but only if I was smart enough not to get greedy. 2 days later, a man named David Wu called to tell me that his International Mining Consortium could offer me $90 million for my mineral rights, with minimal paperwork and immediate payment. I hung up and called Agent Park. Mr. Wu is Vincent Torres' nephew, Agent Park told me. Thank you for calling instead of meeting with him. You just helped us add another charge to Torres' indictment. That night, Robert and I made our decision about the Mountain View offer. The hybrid option, I said. $40 million upfront plus royalties. Are you sure? I'm sure that Dad didn't save this money for me so I could lose it to criminals, I replied. And I'm sure that being greedy is what gets people into trouble with people like Torres. Robert smiled. Dad would be proud of you. Dad would be proud of us, I corrected. We're finally acting like family. The signing ceremony for the Mountain View mining contract was scheduled for a Friday morning in Mr. Mitchell's conference room. I'd spent the previous night reading through the 40-page agreement one final time, making sure I understood every clause and condition. But when I arrived at the law office, I found Robert waiting in the parking lot with a grim expression. Alice, we have a problem, he said. Torres escaped from county jail last night. My blood ran cold. How is that possible? Apparently, he had help from someone on the outside. The FBI thinks it was his nephew, David Wu, but they haven't found either of them yet. Robert's voice was tight with worry. Agent Park called me an hour ago. They're recommending that we postpone the signing until Torres is recaptured. For how long? They don't know. Could be days, could be weeks. I stared at the law office building, thinking about everything we'd been through to get to this moment. Dad's death, the will reading, Torres's threats, the careful negotiations with Mountain View, all of it leading to this morning. No, I said finally. No what? We're not postponing. Torres has terrorized our family for long enough. I'm not going to let him continue controlling our decisions even when he's running from the police. Robert looked uncertain. Alice, Agent Park thinks Torres might try something desperate. He's facing federal charges that could send him to prison for 20 years. He has nothing left to lose. Which is exactly why we're finishing this today, I said firmly. Once the contract is signed and the money is transferred, Torres has no reason to come after us. There won't be anything left for him to steal. Inside the law office, Dr. Chen and her team were waiting with champagne and congratulations. When I explained the situation with Torres, her expression became serious. Ms. Hartwell, if you feel unsafe, we can certainly reschedule this signing. Your security is more important than our timeline. I appreciate that. But I want to move forward, I said. The sooner this deal is completed, the sooner Torres becomes irrelevant to my life. The signing process took 2 hours. Every page required my initials, every clause needed final confirmation, every number had to be verified against our previous negotiations. But finally, Dr. Chen handed me a pen for the last signature. Congratulations, Ms. Hartwell, she said as I signed my name. You're now $40 million richer, with royalty payments beginning as soon as we start extraction operations. As the Mountain View team packed up their documents, Mr. Mitchell's secretary knocked on the conference room door. Mr. Mitchell, there's a Vincent Torres here demanding to see Ms. Hartwell. He says it's urgent business regarding her mineral rights. The room went silent. Dr. Chen looked confused. Robert looked terrified, and Mr. Mitchell immediately reached for his phone to call the police. Don't call anyone, I said quietly. Let him in. Alice, absolutely not, Robert protested. He's desperate and potentially dangerous. Which is why I want to end this face-to-face, I replied. I'm tired of being afraid of Vincent Torres. Against everyone's advice, I told the secretary to show Torres into the conference room. He looked terrible unshaven, wearing rumpled clothes and with the wild-eyed expression of someone who hadn't slept in days. But his voice was still smooth and confident when he spoke. Ms. Hartwell, I'm glad I caught you before you made a terrible mistake, he said, glancing dismissively at the Mountain View team. I have information about your mineral rights that could save you millions of dollars. Really? I said calmly. What information is that? Torres pulled out a folder that looked suspiciously official. I've been in contact with European mining companies that specialize in rare earth extraction. They're prepared to offer you $75 million for your mineral rights, $35 million more than this American company is offering. Dr. Chen started to speak, but I held up my hand to stop her. That sounds very impressive, Mr. Torres, I said. May I see the offer documents? Torres hesitated for just a moment, long enough for me to realize that his folder contained blank papers or photocopied forms that weren't actually legal offers. The documents are still being prepared by their legal team, he said. But I can guarantee that if you wait 24 hours before signing with Mountain View, you'll have multiple competing offers that will dramatically increase your final payment. Mr. Torres, I said, standing up from the conference table, I have some information that might interest you. I handed him the signed Mountain View contract. I just sold my mineral rights to Mountain View Mining for $40 million, plus royalties. The deal is complete. The money has been transferred, and there's nothing left for you to steal from my family. Torres stared at the contract, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and finally desperation. You have no idea what you just did, he snarled. That European company was going to pay you $75 million. You just cost yourself $35 million because you were too stupid to wait one day. Or, I said calmly, I just prevented you from cheating me out of $40 million with a fake offer from a company that doesn't exist. Torres's confident facade finally cracked completely. This isn't over, he said, his voice shaking with fury. Your family destroyed my life, and I'm going to— He never finished the threat. Agent Park and 2 other FBI agents entered the conference room and arrested Torres for the second time in 3 weeks. As they led him away in handcuffs, Torres looked back at me with pure hatred. You think you won? He called out. You have no idea what you're getting into with that mining money. It's going to ruin you just like it ruined everyone else who thought they were smarter than me. After Torres was gone, the conference room was quiet for a long moment. Ms. Hartwell, Dr. Chen said finally, I have to ask, how did you know his European offer was fake? I smiled. Because legitimate mining companies don't send escaped convicts to negotiate million-dollar deals. 6 months later, I stood in the backyard of the farmhouse, watching construction crews install solar panels on the barn roof. The morning sun cast long shadows across the garden where Mom had taught me to grow vegetables, and for the first time since Dad's death, the future felt full of possibilities instead of problems. The first royalty check from Mountain View had arrived the previous week, $200,000 for the initial 6 months of extraction operations. Dr. Chen had called to tell me that the mineral deposits were even richer than their original surveys had indicated, which meant future royalty payments would likely be higher than projected. But it wasn't the money that made me feel wealthy. It was the phone call I'd received that morning from Agent Park. Vincent Torres was sentenced yesterday, he'd told me. 22 years in federal prison for fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering across multiple states. His nephew David Wu got 15 years. Thanks to your cooperation, we were able to build a case that finally put them both away permanently. 22 years. Torres would be nearly 80 when he was released, assuming he lived that long. Agent Park? I'd asked. What happened to the other families Torres cheated? The ones who lost their businesses? That's the best news, he'd replied. Torres was ordered to pay full restitution to all his victims. The court is liquidating his remaining assets and distributing them to the families he destroyed. It won't make them whole, but it's something. After I hung up, I'd sat in Dad's study, thinking about the letter he'd written me about understanding the difference between wanting something and needing something. What I'd wanted was revenge against Torres, justice for what he'd tried to do to our family, and proof that I was strong enough to protect what mattered. What I'd needed was security, peace of mind, and the knowledge that other families wouldn't suffer the way we almost had. Sometimes wanting and needing turn out to be the same thing. Robert found me in the garden that afternoon, reviewing architectural plans for the house renovations. The contractor says they can start on the kitchen next week, he said, settling into the lawn chair beside me. Are you sure you want to do all this work instead of just building a new house somewhere else? This is home, I said simply. Besides, Dad would have loved seeing the farmhouse restored properly. Robert nodded, understanding. He'd been living in Dad's old bedroom for 4 months now, running the construction business with a competence and dedication that would have made our father proud. The 5-year restriction on selling the business hadn't turned out to be a burden, it had turned out to be a gift that forced Robert to slow down and build something sustainable instead of just profitable. Alice, I need to tell you something, Robert said, his voice carrying that serious tone that had once made me nervous, but now just made me pay attention. I've been thinking about what Dad wrote in his letter about family taking care of each other. I want you to know that if anything ever happens to me, my share of the construction business goes to you, not to my daughter Madison. I looked up from the architectural plans. Robert, that doesn't make sense. Madison is your child. Madison is 7 years old, Robert replied. By the time she's old enough to run a business, she might not want to live in Millfield or work in construction. But if something happens to me before she's grown, I want her to have a guardian who will help her make good decisions about money and family. He handed me a legal document. I've been working with Mr. Mitchell to set up a trust for Madison, with you as the trustee. If she wants to be involved in the family business when she's older, the shares are there for her. If she wants to do something else with her life, you can sell the business and use the money for her education or whatever she needs. I read through the trust documents, struck by how carefully Robert had thought through every possibility. This is very generous, I said. But Madison has a mother. Jennifer might not want me making decisions about her daughter's future. I already talked to Jennifer about it, Robert said. She thinks you'd be a good influence on Madison. She also thinks Madison should grow up knowing the family that cared enough to protect her father from his own bad decisions. That evening, Jennifer called from California. Alice, Robert told me about the trust fund he's setting up for Madison. I wanted to thank you for agreeing to be the trustee. I haven't agreed yet, I said honestly. Being responsible for a child's financial future is a big commitment. So is being responsible for $40 million in mineral rights, Jennifer pointed out. But you've handled that pretty well. She had a point. Jennifer, can I ask you something? Why are you willing to trust me with decisions about Madison's future? We barely know each other. There was a pause before she answered. Because when Vincent tried to destroy your family, you didn't just protect yourself. You made sure he got arrested so he couldn't hurt anyone else. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. 2 weeks later, Madison came to visit for spring break. She was a miniature version of Robert, confident, curious, and prone to asking difficult questions. Aunt Alice, she said on her second day at the farmhouse, Daddy says you're rich now because Grandpa left you special dirt. Something like that, I replied, helping her plant tomato seeds in Mom's old garden. Are you going to move to a big city like Daddy used to live in? No, sweetheart, I'm going to stay right here. Madison considered this seriously. Good. Daddy is happier here than he was in New York. He smiles more now. Out of the mouths of babes. That night, after Madison was asleep in my old bedroom, Robert and I sat on the front porch, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the stars come out over the fields where we'd played as children. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Dad had divided everything equally between us? Robert asked. I thought about it. You would have wanted to sell the mineral rights immediately and invest the money in expanding the construction business. Probably, Robert admitted. And Torres would have convinced me to make him a partner in the expansion. And within 2 years, Torres would have stolen everything: the mining money, the construction business, and probably our relationship as brother and sister. So Dad's will wasn't just about the money, Robert said slowly. It was about saving our family. Yeah, I agreed. Dad understood something we didn't, that sometimes protecting people from getting what they want is the best way to give them what they need. As I sat there in the darkness, surrounded by the sounds of the farm and the warmth of family, I realized that Dad's greatest gift hadn't been $40 million in mineral rights. It had been teaching me the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Rich is having money. Wealthy is having something worth protecting. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about family, inheritance, and discovering strength you never knew you had. Your support helps me continue sharing these important lessons about recognizing your own worth and standing up for what's right, even when family members try to convince you otherwise. Remember, sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones who know you the least. And sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to let someone make a decision that will destroy them. The farmhouse still needs work. Madison visits every summer now, and Robert's construction business is thriving under his careful management. But the most valuable thing I inherited from Dad wasn't money or property. It was the understanding that true strength isn't about taking what you want, it's about protecting what matters most.